It's time for a Living Wonders Strangest Things with Michael H. Brown. And you can always check out his website and buy his books, including Lying Wonders, Strangest Things, at spiritdaily.com. I have the site bookmarked, Michael, and it's one of my favorites. I have you and Drudge and ZachMartinRocks.com. Those are my big three that I go to all the time.
Well, that's very kind of you. Appreciate that. We do try to keep it up every day and have 7 days a week for 19 years now.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff. Is it you and your family that maintains the site, or do you have
a
few people?
We work, my wife and I are full-time on it and have been for, like I said, 19 years, more than full-time. We really should have hired people, but back a long time ago, but we're cranking it out.
One of the things that I'm seeing, all kinds of things going on with the weather. Most recently, we have Dorian, which is headed straight for Florida, it looks like, on all the different projections. Actually, it's funny, Michael, when you look at the projections, it looks like some kid went mad in art school with crayons.
Yeah, but overall, it looks like it's going to come, to the center of Florida, and it's right now. It's marked to land kind of near the Cape Canaveral, near the Kennedy Space Center. But it could be, it could jog a little north of there or south. And if it was south, let's say Palm Beach area, in 1928, around September 16th, it was. You had a storm very much like this that smacked into that part of the state, and it killed thousands of people around Lake Okeechobee because the lake flooded into the city on its banks. And it also reminds us, coming Labor Day weekend, of the most powerful storm ever to hit the United States, and that was the Great Labor Day storm that occurred years back, 1935 to be exact, September 2nd. And, Zach, you're talking about a storm here that some people say may have had sustained winds of up to 200 miles an hour and gusts of winds that exploded. It detonated at like 250 miles an hour. The barometric pressure set a record, and I interviewed years ago for a book I have called Sent to Earth. I interviewed one of the survivors of that storm who had lost basically 90% of his family in this storm. He had to swim all night in the dark. But it's rather daunting, especially for those of us like myself who live in Florida and, in fact, in Central Florida.
What did you think of some of the rumors going around? I don't know how true this is or not. And I've heard this in the past. It automatically gets blown up in the press that the president wants to use a nuke on a hurricane.
Well, I don't know what the president said or speculated out loud or anything. I think it would be personally, I think it would be an extremely bad idea. First of all, I don't think it would work, and secondly, you're going to contaminate the ocean with radiation, which can take thousands of years to disintegrate. I don't think we need to do anything further to what we drink and breathe. So it's not going to work. And nature is, as far as I'm concerned, is God's domain. And there's a lot of scientists that started under Obama with weather control, wanting to control the weather and the warming and all of these type things. And by using chemicals, aerosols in the atmosphere, I think it's a very bad idea because, again, it's artificial. We don't know the ramifications down the road, but you're inserting artificial material into a natural environment, and when we've done that in the past, the results vis-a-vis PCBs, DDT, and so forth, Nagasaki, have not been good ones. Or we take a look at places like Chernobyl.
Well, how about Fukushima?
Right.
I'm going to Los Angeles in a couple of weeks. I'm going to take my daughter to Disneyland. She likes doing that. And I always take my family to Santa Monica at the end of Route 66. And my wife and kid, they take their shoes off and they go in the Pacific. And they ask me, do you want to go in the Pacific? I go, no, that is Fukushima water. I'm not going in there. And I don't know. We really technically have one world ocean. All the oceans are connected together. So it's a world ocean. And since I just brought it up, Fukushima, when I look at some of the models, it seems like that radiation is spread all over the place through the world oceans.
Well, there certainly have been concerns in California, especially Northern California. I don't know that it's any dangerous level, but it may be in fish that, especially ones that spawn off Japan. It's just a horrible thing. I mean, I'm in the ocean. I was in the ocean yesterday swimming. And a day before that. So I'm in tune with the Atlantic a little bit. But and of course I've been out to California many, many times. But it's a shame to have nuclear reactors near the ocean. Where there's one south of Miami, speaking of Florida, that I visited. I've toured it, and it's right there on the water. If these things really burst forth, and even Fukushima didn't really burst forth totally into the ocean, there would be hell to pay, literally. And so I think we need not add anything further to that.
I would agree with you on that. I think we can find better ways. We all have to do, regardless of where you stand on the subject of climate change, which is very interesting to me because I remember when I was a kid, scientists telling me in the 70s that we're headed for another ice age. And then it was the ozone. Remember that? Now we got rid of all the aerosols. And then it was global warming. And now we're to climate change. Whether the science is good or not, it's debatable. We could talk about data and how that data has been corrupted and how media forms their own story based on an agenda. All of those things definitely take place. But the bottom line is this, Michael H. Brown. We all have to take care of our little environments, which means that we don't waste things, we don't throw things out and dirty up the lawn, and we don't throw things out the window and pollute the environment. We have to do our individual parts to make sure that we take care of our environment, also to make sure that we're kind to animals. I don't understand why people, I can just imagine why people, they start out abusing animals and it goes from there. But we really should take care of nature. It's created by God. It's not for us to abuse. It's for us to master.
That's right. I couldn't agree with you more. Very well said. I kayak a lot, and I see a lot of different animals, and I see a lot of animals that have suffered. I often just about fill up my kayak with styrofoam cups and beer bottles and beer cans. I wish they were bottles from plastic water bottles from fishermen. I have to take their non-biodegradable fishing line out of limbs so it doesn't strangle some of these poor egrets and herons and other birds that we have, beautiful birds. We've all heard the story that they go out, there's just about every albatross they catch in the mid-Pacific has bottle caps, plastic bottle caps in its stomach. Or they'll find plastic bags here in Florida in alligators that choke them to death, or in whales. This is too much. People say, "Oh, who cares? The economy is what's important." Hey, look, if you don't have nature, you won't have an economy in the future. Witness the Amazon.
Well, if you don't have good health, what good is the economy, right?
That's right.
So our health is tied directly into the world around us, the ecology.
That's right. And, I'm a conservative, but I like to think that I should be more involved with these things because conservative to me ties in with conservation. But we're so polarized right now, Zach, that if you're a conservative, you've got to be against anything to do with the environment, and if you're a liberal, you've got to be in favor of everything with it. It's so out of whack. Everyone should be concerned with these things, just as you stated.
And I think when we get polarized, when we politicize very, basic things, like, for instance, the environment, we have to use our common sense. We have to use our wisdom. For me, anytime I hear of the way to cure this ill is by a tax, like a carbon tax, my automatic reaction is like, no way you're getting another dime out of me. Let's just think about New Jersey for a second here. All the various taxes that we pay. And the tolls. You have the property tax. You're from this area, Then you have the tolls. Then you have the state income tax. And then there's a parking tax, which is 18%. Now they want to do congestive pricing. And before you know it, these carbon taxes, what is that going to do? That's going to fund some rich people. They're going to make money off of that. And even if we reduce our carbon footprint, it doesn't matter because India and China are off the charts with that. So the only people that would be paying for all of this kind of stuff would be us in the United States. There has to be a better way.
Well, I agree with that. Anyone who sees the fact that pollution from China, air pollution now, we're not talking about Fukushima, air pollution from China can impact California, it does, or that the smog from California can smudge the vistas in the Grand Canyon, it does.
That's right.
Or that there are huge refineries and factories on the east coast of Texas, places like Galveston and Beaumont, that create what they call the heat island effect, their own clouds. Look, this stuff has to be affecting the atmosphere. However, I think some of the things you pointed out, and I did also with the chemicals, are right now more urgent. And I think a lot of the, quote, climate change, unquote, is a natural occurrence that we may well be stoking in some degree. But I also think these things can be signs of the times, can be signs, if you'll permit me, signs from God. And I will say this, I'll concede this to those who argue global warming. Back in 1999, I had a book contract to do investigation of various future disasters that may occur. I ended up writing it as the book Sent to Earth that I just mentioned. And I spent a long time. I interviewed about 100 scientists, meteorologists, climatologists, and so forth. And I traveled to Japan. I went to one of the oldest observatories in the world that had the oldest daily record systems, or handwritten, or among them. I mean, I've seen these things firsthand, and I would say that out of 100 scientists, let's say it was 100, that 99 of them told me that there was a shift in climate, and to be fair about it, predicted a lot of the things that I have seen occur since. And there was no politics back then. This was not in the news. There was no term. They weren't using the term global warming or climate change or anything else. They were calling it the greenhouse effect.
Right.
And people have to realize that there's a difference between the terms. We've lost that in the simplicity of politics and media. But something is happening. We contribute to it, but I don't think that that we're the full cause. And even if we were, like you say, what about China? What about India? What about some of these other countries?
I would say we have to start using common sense. I'll give you a quick example, and then we'll talk about some of the things that you'll find in Lying Wonders Strangest Things, which is available at spiritdaily.com. The MTV and Music Awards, the MVAs, right? They were in Newark, New Jersey at the Rock Prudential Center. And there were people protesting because in Newark itself, the water is contaminated with lead. Our priorities is let's make sure that we have the MTV MVA Awards in Newark at the Rock and bring in revenue. But as far as the poor people that live in the area, what the heck with them? We don't do any, we worry about things in every other neighborhood, every other part of the world. But our own neighborhoods, we just sort of neglect. We pretend like it's not happening. We put our head in the sand. And these things can be remedied rather quickly. For instance, there are special types of water filters that take the lead out of the water supply. So it's just a matter of priorities as far as I'm concerned. We were talking about nature. We're talking about the storm that's headed towards Florida, this Hurricane Dorian. And then you mentioned kayaking and your interaction with wildlife. In Chapter 20 of the book, Lying Wonders Strangest Things, you talk about when an animal speaks and when an animal thinks. I would imagine in your trails and in your interaction with nature that you've learned a lot of amazing things from animals, and they do have a way of telling us certain things.
They are amazing. I have an African gray parrot, and I've had him for 14 years. I've had dogs and so forth. I have no question that this animal thinks. We're not just mimics when it talks. For instance, when it's been hungry, it'll say, "I want to eat," and sometimes it would. There would be specificity, want seed, and the other night, another example, every night around 9, 10 o'clock, my wife sets the burglar alarm, and it makes these 4 noises as she, presses the button. And one night we're sitting there last week or the week before, and she hadn't done it yet. And right around the time she does, he makes the noise, He does things like on a constant basis. And the interaction is just incredible. I interviewed this Dr. Irene Pepperberg of Harvard, who had an African gray parrot. Some people think that they're comparable to a 3 to 5 year old child in intelligence. And she did all kinds of tests with this, proving just that. Kind of similar to mine. When he wanted a grape, he'd say, want a grape. He'd look down. She'd say, pick out the red cubes, different colored cubes, and he'd pick out the red ones or the yellow ones or whatever. So these are not just mindless creatures, and they even exhibit feelings a lot of times. We've seen this with chimpanzees. I've been up there in Rwanda with the mountain apes. Years ago, I went up there to view them, and it's just astonishing. I mean, we need to treat them with much more respect, and once we do that, I think that things come back into balance. Right now, we're totally out of balance, and I think these storms are nearly a metaphor for it.
How are the storms a metaphor?
Well, in a sense that things are roiling, I should say. There's whether it's a hurricane out there or whether it's various seismic rumblings. I don't think, Zach, that people realize how powerful a hurricane potentially can get, especially if indeed there is a flux up in temperature. I remember back in 1999 when I did that research that they were projecting that you could have sustained winds of 250 miles an hour. They look in the past. I interviewed a scientist from Louisiana State University who had found evidence of massive storm surges in the past, way bigger than anything we've seen in the centuries since we've had records. And there's no question that the intensification it has been there in the last several decades. So I think you're going to see more of this, and like I said, it's a sign of the time.
Do you think it's, God's wrath coming against us?
I think God's wrath exists, if you want to say wrath or chastisement or purification, whatever word you want to pin on it. I do think that we're at a time when there will be various disturbances, whether in the weather or, as I said, seismic or volcanic. Whether it's something that has to do with asteroids. We forget how many times in the past these events have occurred, and we've been unbelievably fortunate in the past century that something truly major like Yellowstone supervolcano has not occurred. But these events eventually will.
We are overdue in many ways. I've noticed that magnetic north is shifting faster than they expected, so there's a potential for a pole shift. In your research, when you're writing books like Wonders Strangest Things, are those some of the phenomena that you look at?
Well, I think the magnetic poles are important to some degree. It's not like the Earth is tilting, however. That would really be something, and it's something that can occur. I saw one prophecy from the visionary at the famous site of Fatima in Portugal saying that in the third secret of Fatima, there was an angel touching the earth, and she got a further enlightenment in the 1940s that the angel was causing a change in the axis of the earth sometime in the future. So who knows, Zach? If you believe in Fatima, I happen to very much, been there a couple times, that we're facing a series of rather major future events. What is the third secret? Well, the third secret ended up being really an image that one of the three seers, Lucia dos Santos, who died more than 10 years ago, was given, whereby she saw a man in white she interpreted as being the Pope being gunned down. That was she later attributed to possibly the shooting of John Paul II. He was very involved with Fatima. And remember, this is 1917 that she was shown us. And martyrdom within Christianity was something that she was shown, as well as that image of an angel ready to torch the earth, but prevented from doing that by the Virgin Mary. That was the vision, the third secret of Fatima. But a lot of people don't think that it's necessarily over. It has been stopped, that angel touching the earth with that fire like in Revelation. But maybe it means that was a temporary reprieve, and I think we need to pay some heed to more recent alleged prophecies from pretty established places that foresee major events, including apparitions that have been fully approved by the Vatican.
God is saying something. This idea that God is trying to tell us something, no. God is telling us something. And it's really up to us in this relationship with God to make sure that we are hearing God. And the only way we can hear is through prayer. And living as a Christian is not easy. It means really dying to your old self. It means standing up for the kingdom of God. It means standing up against evil. Now, I did talk to a fellow priest of mine, and we rarely ever, Michael, talk politics. You know, we pray for the president. In our liturgy, it says pray for the president. It doesn't say pray for the Republican president,
right.
Democratic president. Pray for the president. And you should always pray for your enemies, by the way. You might find that the change of heart takes place in you. But having said that, I go, what do you think is going on? And he thinks, well, first off, there's this idea of utopia, Michael. It's not going to happen on this planet. It's just not. The utopia is in the kingdom of God.
That's right.
When we talk about the Antichrist, maybe the Antichrist isn't going to find it like the Antichrist expects it to be. Maybe we are getting all along. Maybe, things aren't so bad, and that's when the deception creeps in. This fellow priest, he thinks that conservatism is going to eventually win out because it's just a bastion of better ideas that are more healthy.
Well, it's a sanguine view. I don't know if I totally agree with it because of just the trending I'm seeing out there. But spirit of extremes is Satan. He wants to take you to one extreme or the other, and one of the extremes he would like you at is not even believing he exists. And if he can't do that, he'll take you to the extreme of focusing entirely on him. And he does the same thing politically, sociologically, culturally, economically. So the key word is balance. We need to have a spiritual balance, and we only get that through what you mentioned, and that's prayer.
There's one story in the Bible that I would like to share because it talks about what you mentioned, these extremes. And it's the prodigal son. It's probably the best short story ever written. And when we hear the story, we tend to, I don't know if you ever did this, but have you ever thought about the older son, Michael, and go, wow, that seems like that's really unfair. The guy's got a point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, who is this older brother? And what is his problem? And why is he also in the wrong? Well, the prodigal is one thing. He was a sinner, but so is the older son. And it's something that we all can fall victim to. When you talk about the extremes, whether you're conservative or liberal, whether you're a churchgoer or not, if there is no love in your heart, that is the greater sin. Because the older brother could have, if he really loved his younger brother, got in the mix and said, what are you, crazy? That's not loving your dad. That's not what love's about. I love you, man. Don't go out there. What do you think you're going to get out there? It's just misery for you. I'm your brother. Hang out with me. We can have a better time. And when the prodigal returns, he doesn't even refer to him as his brother. So the older son, his heart was not in the right place. It was all about what he can gain for himself. He didn't worry about what happened to his brother. And he probably didn't care about how his father was feeling about the younger brother and the situation going on. So that's something to contemplate. We always focus on that older brother thinking, well, boy, that wasn't fair. But when you look deeper into that, it's a question about the heart. So is your heart right? That is the theme for today as we wrap up Lying Wonders Strangest Things. And before we leave, there's something in this book that I am very interested in, and you can tease it a little bit, and people can buy it at spiritdaily.com. The Most Amazing Miracle.
To me, it is what happened to a mystic, a Catholic mystic from Caracas, Venezuela, Maria Esperanza, who on more than a dozen occasions, according to witnesses, some of whom I interviewed, one of whom I was good friends with. He had worked as a radio broadcaster in his last days as a Catholic one in a major show in Philadelphia, and before that he'd been with CBS. His wife was also working with him in broadcasting, and he saw, as did so many others through the years, an actual rose work its way out of her chest and unfold. This happened more than a dozen times. He only saw it once. But it was even filmed by a reporter at Venevision in Caracas. The church has the video and does not want to release it pending. She's up for canonization right now, beatification technically, and they won't release it until she is or is not canonized. So that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard. And I think that there was a saint many centuries ago who had the same alleged phenomenon where a flower erupted from the chest, and they would said it was like she was giving birth, like birth pangs, and there would even be dew on it, and a stem would have thorns on it. She gave me a petal from one of them, which I value. She is now deceased, but she was right up there with Padre Pio. Matter of fact, she knew Padre Pio and used to go see him on a regular basis. She had so many things occur with her that's amazing. I wrote a book about her called Bridge to Heaven. Actually, it was a book of interviews. And, she was fully accepted by her local bishop, and her site of apparitions, Betania, Venezuela, was approved formally by the church as a place of apparition.
That's amazing. It's truly an amazing miracle that you're right about. How many miracles will people find in Lying Wonders Strangest Things that you think that might be the impetus for a real life-changing moment?
Well, in the Protestant realm or non-denominational, I went to see a Bible that exudes oil. Some rather devout evangelical, born-again types. And I mean exudes.
Was it myrrh? Did it have a fragrance to it?
No, not to my knowledge. And certainly we do see that with a lot of icons, including a lot of Orthodox icons.
Oh, yeah, that's a big thing in the Orthodox Church,
yes.
Myrrh-streaming icons, and they do exist. Yeah.
I've been out in Long Island to see that one in Hempstead, and I was out in Tucson at an Orthodox church where you could see this blood coming out of the side of an icon that was on a Bible. But at any rate, it is to the point now where this Bible was put in a plastic container, and the container is full of oil. The Bible is submerged, and yet the Bible stays intact. And this oil, they do give vials away, or they used to, and it's kind of hard now because so many request it. But that's a pretty amazing miracle, too. Usually, as we just said, you see this with, drops coming from a statue of the Virgin Mary or Jesus or whatever. But this is coming from a Bible, and continues to this day.
That's amazing. All right. Well, if you want a copy of Lying Wonders Strangest Things, written by my good friend Michael H. Brown, you can go to spiritdaily.com, and there are all kinds of articles to see, and you can keep track of what's happening with Dorian right on the front page. Here comes Dorian. So we're going to make sure that we watch that. You can also follow me at facebook.com/BigFatAmerican. You can download the podcast at iTunes at Big Fat American. We're also on Spotify, radio.com, as well as iHeart and various other platforms. And, Michael, I have to tell you something. In 2 weeks, this is pretty darn good considering we've had over 1,000 people listening to these episodes. So, glory be to God. I think this is fascinating. I think it's exciting. I'm so glad that I have an opportunity to talk about what's going on in the world and this book, Lying Wonders, Strangest Things, and all your other books and what you got going at spiritdaily.com. Keep up the good work.
You too, Zach. It's great to be with you.